kind words of introduction. And let me just say that not only do you always have a smile, but a solution. Right, folks? Great chairman. And my staff enjoyed so much working with you. Thank you for being so gracious. And I'm thrilled to be here with you all tonight. And let me just say on behalf of all the candidates who will be speaking tonight that we just thank you for all that you do to make what we do possible. So bless you for having such a great event. And you know, I like the Dole stroll. You've given me a chance to do this. I haven't done it in a while. But the podium sort of becomes a barrier between me and an audience. And I like to sort of be able to walk around and get up close, and sometimes I find some friends that I haven't seen, and it's just a lot of fun. But I want to talk tonight about some of my experiences with President Reagan, since we are celebrating Lincoln-Reagan Day. And the first thing that comes to mind, Bart, is when President Reagan asked me to serve as his Secretary of Transportation. I'd had 2 years with him in the White House as Assistant for Public Liaison. And so my husband went with me to the Commerce Committee for an introduction, you know, because I had to be confirmed, and this was my hearing. Now, the way this started out was that Bob Dole said, "I regret that I have but one wife to give for my country's infrastructure." Paraphrasing Nathan Hale. Now, that's okay, right? But then he said, you know, maybe the Federal Highway Administration could use Elizabeth's biscuit recipe for filling potholes. He said that to the whole Commerce Committee. So it's time for me to think of something that some wisecrack to throw out there too, right? So I said, well, you know something? We don't have airbags yet, and we'll be working on that, but I know all about airbags. Because I've been driving around with one for years. Is that okay? You like that one? Okay. So, I was confirmed. I went to work as Secretary of Transportation and spent 5 years there, serving in President Reagan's cabinet. And, you know, President Reagan was very much for deregulation, and certainly I am too. And I said to the President, Mr. President, there are going to have to be some areas where we're going to need to move forward with some regulation. In the safety area, for example. And so I want to share with you something that, frankly, I'm kind of proud of, because there was a week in July 1984. We called it Trifecta Week. President Reagan had agreed that he would support age 21 drinking rule. And the reason was these young people were driving to states with lower drinking ages. They would drink alcohol, try to drive back, and often have a terrible accident, which would cause a debilitating injury or death itself. We had a lot of these blood borders. And so I wanted to support age 21, and the President agreed to do so, and I went up to testify. Okay, the week of July 11th, that became effective, and the President signed it into law. But also it was the week when my Rule 208 from the Department of Transportation became effective. And let me tell you quickly what Rule 208 provided. This was remanded from the Supreme Court on my watch. And basically, we took 7 weeks to gather new accident data. And the idea was not a single state in America had a state safety belt laws. You had the safety belts, but there were no laws. And then we had no airbags except in a few cars. It took a long time to find one to put on the White House lawn. Because I said to the President, you and the Cabinet need to go out and look at what an airbag car looks like. And we found one, we put it on the White House lawn, and they all marched out there to look at it. But we also had to convince consumers that they wanted airbags, because a lot of people thought, oh my, if I have an airbag in my car across the railroad tracks, this thing's going to go off. So we had a lot of work to do. But in that week of July 11th, 1984, that rule became effective. And the idea was to get both. To get airbags and passive restraints into cars, and to get the states, the way this rule was formed, to pass safety belt laws. And so now both are accomplished. And according to safety experts in Washington, as a result of that trifecta, age 21, the safety belt laws, and also the airbags, 228,000 lives have been saved. Now that's the joy of public service. And I talk about his concern for regulation and my sharing that. On my watch also at the Department of Transportation, when I was serving President Reagan, fell the responsibility for selling a freight railroad, Conrail. Well, now, there's no reason to have a freight railroad in the federal government, right? So we wanted to get it out of the government. It took us 3 years. It was some of the hardest work I ever had to do. You had to become kind of an antitrust lawyer, and you had to become a rail expert and understand how to go forward with a public offering on Wall Street. But we got it done, and we returned $2 billion to the United States as a result of the sale of Conrail in the private sector. We also got 2 airports out of the federal government. And I don't want to belabor this, but I do want you to understand that when we talk about less regulation, I've been there. I've had the experience of getting a railroad out of the government and 2 airports, which were the gateways to our nation's capital. And that's National and Dulles airports. Little old tiny building there was the gateway to the nation's capital. And so I said to my husband one night, this is pillow talk, I said, Bob, we've got to go forward and figure out a way to get those airports out of the government so that they're off the dole, so to speak, the federal dole, and they can get revenue bonds and really be able to build a beautiful new entry to the nation's capital and double the size out at Dulles Airport. Bob said, forget it, Elizabeth. It's been tried 8 times since 1948, and it's never gotten out of committee in either the House or the Senate. That's my husband talking as majority leader of the Senate. Well, folks, that was throwing down the gauntlet, right? Bob Dole says it can't be done. We're going to find a way to do it, right? And Mark, you know how we did it? By putting a coalition together. And this was Republicans and Democrats, because it was the mayor of D.C., it was the governor of Virginia, it was the CEOs of the airlines. But instead of marching up to Capitol Hill alone as the transportation department, we had a coalition. And it took us, again, 3 years to do it, but we got it done. So, you know, these are the kinds of challenges that I've had to face in a lot of positions over the years, whether it's the Red Cross changing the way that we provide and test and distribute half of America's blood supply, or whether it's issues like I've described when I was working for President Reagan. And it was wonderful to have a boss like him. Because you know something, I had the opportunity one time to talk with him when it was just the 2 of us about what enabled him to be able to respond to so many challenges with calmness and with graciousness. I said, Mr. President, you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, and yet you never seem frazzled or frustrated. You're so gracious to everyone and so kind. And I said, how do you do it? And he loved to reminisce. And he'd kind of lean back, and and he'd start reminiscing. And he said, well, Elizabeth, when I was governor of California, he said it seemed like every day yet another disaster would be placed on my desk. And I had the urge to hand it to someone behind me to help me. And one day I realized I was looking in the wrong direction. So I looked up instead of back. And he said, I'm still looking up. And I couldn't go another day in this office if I didn't know I could ask God's help, and it would be given. I agree with exactly those words. And so here we have a man who was a person who believed in our traditions and our values and our principles. And that's what we've got to get out there and fight for, folks. This may be a tough election cycle, but we can do it. But we got to get out there and we got to fight for the integrity and the honesty and the belief in family and the love of God and the things that He stood for. Personal responsibility, right? Personal responsibility. And that's exactly what he believed in and what we must do. It's our personal responsibility now to get out and win these elections and work hard at it and show people what we really stand for. So these were just some of the things that I wanted to share about the president himself. But let me talk about a couple of issues that I think you all feel strongly about in this community. And while I'm still on President Reagan, I want to stress strong national defense. Because no question about it, I mean, he would want to make the tax cuts permanent, and they should be made permanent. He would certainly want to continue efforts on deregulation and efforts to get rid of, for example, or at least modify somehow for the business people, Sarbanes-Oxley, Section 404, and also less litigation. But he'd also be urging us to look at national defense. Why? Because we had a procurement holiday for a long time during the 90s. Now, we need to modernize every branch of the armed services in terms of next generation equipment. I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and I've been looking at this very carefully because we need to increase, and we will be increasing our Marines and our Army by 95,000 in strength. But there are a lot of things that go with that in the way of expenses. But that's very important. Also, we're building 1 Virginia-class submarine a year. The Chinese are building 5 Virginia-class submarines a year. They will soon have the equivalent of our force. So we have to be thinking about the fact that a lot of our equipment is not only aging, it's aged. There's an F-15 that broke up recently. The fuselage just broke up. You know, they're flying planes in the Air Force past the time when they ought to be retired. Now that's wrong. We are the United States of America, and our defense has to come first in terms of having strong national defense. I can give you a lot of other reasons for why we need to do this, like basic research. But the point is, let's go to at least 4% of our gross domestic product. Right now we're at 3.3%. And we've got to look ahead. So I have sponsored a resolution. It's a joint resolution with Congressman Franks in the House that would require that we be at least 4% of our GDP. And so we're going to get that debate started. I hope we'll get it into the budget resolution. And already senators are signing on, and I'm talking with them about why this needs to be done and laying out the reasons. But I'm so pleased that recently our Secretary of Defense said the same thing at one of our hearings, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, said we need to be at least 4% of GDP. We're on our way, right? So we'll get this moving. But speaking of defense, I want to say too that I was very, very proud to be a part of ensuring that we did not lose any major bases in the BRAC round. And also, we're getting 9,000 additional jobs at Fort Bragg. And folks, this is money into the economy. It's $18 billion a year into our North Carolina economy. And I understand that there is a person running on the other side who's been saying that she's responsible for all this. I'm going to set the record straight. Let me tell you how hard we worked for this. We worked with the Secretary of Defense, a lot of other members of the Defense Department. In fact, there was a meeting in my office with the governor's office represented, members of the House and the Senate, and the DOD people who were going to be decision makers. And we underscored all the reasons why our military installations are so vitally important to what we're doing now and to the future. And so what I talked to Tony Principi, who is the head of the BRAC Commission, all of Tony's commissioners. We worked with the communities involved, and I think we came through with flying colors because there were no major base closures, and we did get 9,000 additional jobs at Fort Bragg. And I was talking tonight about Honor Air. You all, are there any veterans here tonight who came to Washington with Honor Air? Just raise your hands for a minute. What a great program. Isn't that tremendous? And it's a North Carolinian who helped to start that. And this is for people from World War II to fly to Washington and to see their World War II memorial, the monument, which my husband, I'm proud to say, had a lot to do with raising the funds and getting that done. So Bob goes down every Saturday when the veterans come in. Of course, it's too cold now, so they're not doing it right now. But when Asheville came to Washington, I have to tell you all what happened. Bob was out of town, and I wanted to be there. And he does it just as a private citizen, just goes down to the memorial and shakes the hands of all the veterans as they came through. The Asheville group was stuck at the national airport, the new airport over there. And they couldn't come in because of a triathlon that was underway. And so I'm waiting for them, sitting in the car at the memorial, waited about 45 minutes, and I called somebody on my staff and I said, you know something? We've got to get an escort for our Asheville veterans. There are 3 buses loaded with Asheville veterans out at the airport trying to get into the World War II memorial. So they got a police escort, one of my staff who really knows how to do these things. And all of a sudden we hear the sirens and we see an escort before and behind, and the 3 bus loads coming in. And they start to unload, and of course there were walkers and there were wheelchairs, and there were people who had come along to help a father. And there was one woman who'd been with the FBI back then. And so it was a joy to meet them, to have lunch with them, to walk around the memorial with them. But one of the things that was so funny, one of the Asheville veterans said, you know something? He said, we had so much fun because we came in on the wrong side, all the way from the airport to the memorial. We were on the wrong side of the road, and those Washingtonians were so angry, and he just laughed. He loved it. I think they got almost as much fun out of that as seeing the memorial. But, you know, when we talk about our veterans, ladies and gentlemen, and those young men and women who are out there fighting for our freedom and our security. And I remember Bob Dole, somebody saying, what is it like to be a part of the greatest generation? He said, no. It's the young men and women being deployed today. They're the greatest generation. And I know I'm probably going to be talking too long, and I hope you all will be patient with me. When I get started, sometimes I can't stop. And I do want to tell you a story about a North Carolinian who came to my office. And his name was Ed Edmondson. And he said, Senator Dole, he said, I just want to tell you, my son just came back from Iraq with head injuries. And he said, they've told me that he will be in a state of vegetation the rest of his life. And he said, I'm not going to let that happen. I have quit my job at New Bern. And I'm up there in Chicago by his bedside. And I'm cheerleading and I'm inspiring him and I'm working with him and motivating him, working with these great doctors and nurses. Bottom line, Eric Edmondson walked out of that hospital with some help. And he and his family had been in my office just before the Christmas recess. Ed and Eric and his mother and his little child and his wife. And he's in a wheelchair and he can't speak yet. But his eyes filled with tears as he was following the conversation. And at the end of the visit, his father said, Senator Dole, Eric wants to show you something. And they helped him up out of that wheelchair. And with some help, he walked across the room and gave me a huge, big bear hug. And you know, I just feel emotionally every time I talk about it. And I want people to know what these young men and women are doing for us. And my husband and Donna Shalala, who was Secretary of Health and Human Services in the Democratic administration, they co-chaired a commission to look at VA and DOD hospitals after the Walter Reed problems. And one of their recommendations was that there be given 6 months for a spouse or a child or a parent, 6 months leave from the Family and Medical Leave Act. So they don't have to give up their job, but they have 6 months to go and be by the bedside somewhere in America of a veteran who's going through this, or maybe active duty, who's going through this long rehabilitation period. And we were able to get that into law. We did it in a bipartisan way, but it is now the law, and I'm very proud of that. And let me go on for a moment on the illegal immigration issue, because I think this is something that everyone is concerned about. And I've got to tell you, this to me was the Senate at its worst. I'm going to be honest with you, because there was a small group behind closed doors who came up with a piece of legislation that affects all parts of our society and our economy. Huge, huge issues. And it was presented to us in the Senate, the rest of the senators, on Friday late afternoon. Harry Reid said he wanted to start voting on it Monday. So here we are studying pages, hundreds of pages, 500 or more, over the weekend. Then Monday, a lot of it's changed. And also Harry Reid says, I'm not going to allow any amendments. In other words, the amendments, that's when you can fix something, try to make it palatable. But he wouldn't allow any amendments. And so a group of us, a small group, because the way the Senate works, you can stop something. You know, we got together and said, frankly, we're going to kill this bill because this is not right. It's not right. Americans, and certainly North Carolinians, because our phone system crashed in the Senate. I mean, it crashed. Yeah. And people said, you know, look, we want proof. We want proof that the borders are secure. We don't want just more promises. That's what the Senate said in 1986. In fact, Chuck Grassley from Iowa joined our little group, and he said, you know, you're about to do it again, Senate. You're about to do it again. Because the borders are not secure. We went from 3 million to at least 12 million, maybe more. And so we've got to show people that we're serious about this. That's step number one, securing the borders. Number two, people want us to enforce our laws. So we've gotten $3 billion to help secure the borders. There will be more. We'll have to, and that's underway. And then my focus has been very specifically on those who self-identified themselves because of their criminal behavior. And I don't know how anybody can disagree with trying to deport people who are coming to our state and they're involved in gang-related activities and drug-related activities. If people can't feel safe and secure in their own homes, then what else matters, you know? So what we're trying to do is work with all of the sheriffs. In fact, your sheriff here in Buncombe County is on the steering committee that's been set up, 8 sheriffs. But basically, here's the process we went through. We started meeting with sheriffs all across North Carolina. And during the August recess, I had a chance to meet with probably 50 or 60 in different groups. And we listened to them, all of the things that they related. I mean, it would make your hair stand up on end. And we daily fed that back to the Department of Homeland Security. In other words, we were facilitating these sheriffs and the Homeland Security working together here. And we kept saying to the ICE people, this is Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Homeland Security, you know, we need not just regional plans, but we need a statewide plan for North Carolina so that we can really, we can really drive people out. And so ICE really cooperated. And people have had frustration with ICE, but they did a great job working with us to develop a statewide plan. It was presented to the Sheriff's Convention at Carolina Beach in October. And now it's underway with this steering group that meets once a month. I have a representative on that steering group with the sheriffs and with ICE. She's non-voting, but she can facilitate and tell me everything that's happening so that we can keep this moving. Sheriff Pendergraft from Mecklenburg County worked with 287G, which many of you have heard of, which deputizes sheriff's deputies to actually start a deportation process. At least they can find out if the people in their jail are legal or illegal. They couldn't even find out. You know. The Sheriff Pendergraft has now gone to Washington. He's in ICE as the head of state and local affairs for the whole country. And he was in my office last week, and I said, Jim, what do you think? Do you think our plan's going well? Because we're the only state that has a statewide plan. So we're on the forefront of this. And he said, it's going beautifully. And I said, well, listen, I know you've got the whole country, but you watch over this one and just be sure that we continue to see it move forward well. And what we're doing is they're auditing the whole state. Because 287G may be great for Mecklenburg, where they've deported 3,000 criminals. That may be fine for them. But it may not be what Gates County needs, or Ashe County needs, or Cherokee County needs. So we're going to figure out what works best. There's a whole array of enforcement tools that can be used. And we'll keep trying to get more money to them so they can help facilitate what our sheriffs are doing in North Carolina. So that's Now, let me talk about just a couple other things real quickly. And that would be the fact that here at Mission Hospital, it would have cost this hospital $17 million, $16 million this year if we hadn't been able to get the postponement of a Medicaid rule. And again, I'm proud that I had the chance to take the lead on this. The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services promulgated this rule that narrows the definition of public hospital. And so, if this went into effect, it would cost our North Carolina hospitals $330 million a year. And so we worked very hard to make sure that Mission did not lose $16 million this year. And the whole purpose is they're serving the uninsured and low-income people. That's the public hospital. And they're trying to say that 43 of our 45 public hospitals are not really public hospitals. So we're fighting that one. We got the moratorium, so there's no loss for Mission Hospital this year. Now we got to get it for another year. So that's going to be one of the things that I'll be headed back to Washington to work on right away. But that's very important in terms of what it would cost. Another thing, the tobacco quota buyout. I'm really proud of that because when I campaigned on that in 2002, I had no idea how hard that baby was going to be to put into place. There are only a handful of senators who even care about tobacco. And you know, our state's #1, so in the production. And what we wanted to do was to be sure that farmers could retire with dignity, to pay off their debts, or transition to another crop, or be able to compete on a world market, because this buyout would enable them to be competitive. And before that, it was not possible, really. So there were a lot of reasons to ensure that this happened. And Richard Burr was very helpful. He was then in the House of Representatives. I had a man named David Rouser who really worked. That's all he did, was work to get this buyout, to figure out the angles and the procedures. And we were able to get it through. So that is in effect, and it's $4 billion into North Carolina's economy again. And it's the right thing to do, the fair thing to do. And you have Burley in western North Carolina. So I want to mention that. And then finally, you know, you look at the textiles, furniture, the transition that we've been going through. And so many jobs lost because of the Chinese and all the rest of it. And so, I mean, in Pilatex, which is near my hometown of Salisbury, 5,000 people lost their jobs in one day. So we look at every trade agreement that comes along from the standpoint of how will it affect North Carolina. And believe me, if it's going to be a problem, we're going to be on the phone with the White House. I spent one whole weekend, Saturday, Sunday, back and forth, changing provisions, just saying, I won't vote for it if it stays like this. So you have to do that. You have to watch every part of it as these trade agreements come along. But also, we need to protect these displaced workers. And I've got to tell you, I think our community college system is the best in America. I really do. Your AP Tech Community College here is doing a terrific job. And they're on the forefront. They're trying to help people who spent their whole lives in these mills or plants since they were teenagers. And I'll never forget having people surround me saying, what's going to happen to my 401k? I'm 62. How do I get retraining? I have cancer. What's going to happen to my health insurance? And so you're working on all these kinds of issues. We've handled 37,000 cases now in the 5 years I've been in the Senate, cutting the red tape, trying to solve problems for people. And that's the joy of it. That's the joy of public service, when you can make a difference, a positive difference. So I want to see us get the trade adjustment assistance completed. We'll be working on that when we get back for displaced persons. It will cover people in textiles and apparel, all people who are displaced. And you know, this, with the community college efforts, I think it's going to make a difference. We have legislation that was included in the Higher Education Act, and it enables community colleges to receive grants if they will train people in the jobs for the 21st century in that area. And also, it makes it easier to transition credits from one institution to another without having to repeat the course, and it helps small businessmen and women to get training for a global marketplace. So I'm glad that that was included in the higher education bill. One last word, and that is that in the time that I was president of the Red Cross for 8 years, I'd go up to people and I'd say, you know, as I was talking about the Red Cross and all, I'd say, I need 3 things from you. I need your time, your money, and your blood. Now, I'm not going to ask for your blood tonight, okay? But I am going to ask for your time. I'm going to ask for your money. We're going to have to raise a lot of money because we're going to be in a competitive race. And I'm going to ask for your prayers. Because I truly believe that with all of the challenges that we're faced with today, and we're working hard up there and then all over the state, the 100 counties, during weekends and recesses, I need an undergirding of prayer, a prayer network, prayer warriors. And so I ask you to be that for me, for our other officials. And finally, let's keep those young men and women who are fighting for our freedom and security in our prayers. God bless each and every one of you, this great state, this land of the free, America. Thank you.
Senator Dole, on behalf of the Republicans in Buncombe County, we have a small token of our appreciation. It certainly is nothing that could match the sacrifice and service you've given to us and to our state, but it is a little reminder that we will keep you in our prayers. Go with God and Godspeed, and that's actually a vase. Please do. It's a vase that was made by Brown's Pottery right here in Buncombe County. So thank you so much.